At Joyce Meyer Ministries, something unexpected is going on behind the scenes. Joyce abruptly left Daystar TV in 2025 after working there for 20 years. The official explanation was not disclosed, but papers that were leaked reveal otherwise. This time, it's about serious accusations that go beyond money. With a significant decline in its viewership, her ministry is frantically looking for new venues. This might be the start of the end, according to insiders. Now, the lady who created a $100 million empire is facing her lowest point. What was the actual event at Daystar? On June 4, 1943, Joyce Meyer was born in South St. Louis as Pauline Joyce Hutcherson. The city was weighed down by upheaval at the beginning of World War II, but her home was even more so. The day she was born, her father, a machinist, was drafted into the army. He departed practically immediately and was absent for 3 years. Between June 1943 and June 1946. Everything had changed by the time he returned to the house. There was something sinister about war. He carried a sort of wrath that permeated every room, drank more, and spoke less. Already struggling financially, the emotional burden just made matters worse. Although the working-class neighborhoods surrounding her appeared stable and intimate, there was only conflict within her home. Layer by layer, the anxiety that permeated those early years remained with her and became the foundation of her childhood. As she grew older, her father's internal harm started to show. His drinking became a source of control and eventually abuse. The regulations began to feel weird to Joyce when she was about 5 years old. Isolation and increasingly severe penalties soon followed. Even minor infractions carried serious repercussions in the home where she grew up, and she observed other children, music, playing freely. She claims that the sexual assault had already started by 1946, when she was just 3 years old. The fact that music resided in the walls was a secret. Her mother remained silent, frightened and battered by her own struggles with him. It was all made worse by that quiet music. Early on, Joyce discovered that no one was coming to her aid, which left her feeling stuck in a world from which she was unable to get out. Her mother's strength, meantime, gradually diminished. She was worn down by years of being slapped, accused, and disregarded. By the age of 7, Joyce was navigating life without the support of her current mother. She carried the weight of what transpired behind closed doors as well as her own feelings and suffering. On certain days, she looked for solace but found nothing. There were times when her mother left the room rather than entering. Joyce felt a tiny piece of herself disappear each time it occurred. The pain persisted, and the loneliness molded her. Something within her, however, started searching for a different type of light. She was 9 when she first noticed the light. She opened a Bible in 1952 while seated in a little South St. Louis classroom and began reading it independently. It had the atmosphere of a soft gateway. It seemed like soft hands reaching out to her as the words of forgiveness and love were spoken. As she continued to read, she gradually began to experience a newfound strength in her life. Her heart then began to change, and she became a Christian again. She briefly hoped it might make the area surrounding her house less dark. However, the assault persisted the night she got back from church. The fact that the family still appeared to be religious from the outside made her beliefs feel even more isolated rather than protected. Nothing changed inside. About once a week at first, the abuse persisted for almost 10 years. Between 1952 to 1962, there was a profound quiet that nearly engulfed her. As she grew older, the abuse became worse. Joyce subsequently claimed that from the time she was 10 until she became 18, her father had abused her at least once a week. Each of the more than 200 instances that resulted from that left a mark that was invisible to others. To keep her silent, he instilled terror. He made her feel bad by lying to her. She believed him when he warned her of the consequences if she spoke up. He went so far as to target other local girls. However, Joyce took the brunt of the attacks. Every detail was meticulously prepared. Silence was necessary for everything. The quiet seemed to go on forever. Something even more sinister came into play in her early adolescence. To keep her under control, her father started using porn. To confuse her and destroy her sense of self, he made her watch it. She felt awkward, humiliated, and odd in the presence of other children. Work at school slipped. Because she was aware of what he may do, she stopped inviting friends over. She thought she was useless by the time she was 12. Not only because of what he did, but also because of the daily things he told her. Her psyche was being eroded by each insult. Each danger became deeper. And the loneliness was exacerbated by her mother's silent suffering in the background. Her existence was encircled by a tightrope of shame, anxiety, and bewilderment. The deepest wound was the silence of her mother. Joyce wished someone would defend her. However, her mother was ensnared in a web of anxiety. Because she couldn't handle the shame that would accompany speaking up, she decided to keep quiet. Her admission came years later. She claimed she was unable to handle the music scandal. It was too late to apologize. The evenings Joyce felt alone in her own house were too vivid to be erased by it. She learned the worst lesson of her youth from that quiet. Sometimes the person you think will keep you safe is unable to do so. In 1961, when she was 18, she ran. The memories and the grief were still raw when she left the house. She lacked true support and had little money. She took whatever jobs that helped her make ends meet, including working as a secretary in a nearby insurance office. She left home, but fear followed her everywhere. Her life had been marked by mistrust and anxiety due to years of abuse. But she breathed her first breath of freedom as soon as she left that house. Despite its shakiness, she married quickly for the first time. She yearned for someone to treat her differently because she was so young. She ultimately chose to date a man she subsequently referred to as a scammer. He misled. He cheated. He took. Twice he abandoned her. In California, I once had a carton of drink bottles and a scent. Before dissolving in 1966, the couple endured 5 traumatic years. She returned to the house where she had grown up, which was already tainted by memories. In an attempt to find stability, she soon got married again, but this again brought with it emotional upheavals. She was hurt, resentful, and furious after these early encounters and didn't know what to do. She gave birth to her first child, Laura, at the age of 22 in 1965. She worked as a bank teller full-time and lived in a small apartment. She hardly had enough cash for necessities. Her life was infiltrated by depression. Every day, the burden of both fresh obligations and past tragedy weighed heavily on her chest. While counseling was helpful at times, it never really addressed the underlying causes of her grief. She was lost in her own thoughts, struggling with guilt, anxiety, and rage. There were days when she found it difficult to perform basic tasks. Still, she gradually began to search for faith once more in the midst of all that gloom. It took years, but those little steps laid the groundwork for her future ministry and marked the start of her recovery. In 1976, Joyce Meyer was 33 when an event occurred that affected her for the remainder of her life. She was praying in the same manner she had prayed countless times before, exhausted and irritated, as she drove to work in the early hours of the morning. Then there was a change. Later, she claimed to have heard her name shouted 3 times, clearly and intimately, and to have been shaken by the presence that filled her car. She was both astonished and excited by it. Since she was little, she had been a Christian. She was almost engrossed in her own routine during those years, though, and felt hollow. Something felt different that day. The voice seemed to be directly addressing the areas where she kept quiet. That evening, she felt nearly intoxicated by the Spirit of God as she returned home. She couldn't shake the feeling. It became ingrained in her, altering her understanding of herself as well as how she read the Bible and prayed. It was the turning point that transformed her from a quiet believer into someone who desired guidance and action. She began modestly soon after this pivotal moment. During lunch breaks, she got together with a few co-workers and shared a Bible. When she asked her pastor what she should start studying, he suggested a Thompson Chain Reference Bible. She started her lesson by opening it at John 1 verse 1. It started off with just 25 or 30 individuals, but they continued to return every Tuesday night, rain or shine. They enjoyed the way she discussed issues they had at work and at home. She shared her personal challenges. When she was learning something new, she was straightforward. The group developed so fast that she added a study at a friend's house on Thursday afternoons. 5 years were spent by that second group. People came because the music courses were authentic, straightforward, and relevant to their everyday lives. She joined Life Christian Center in Fenton, Missouri, with her spouse by the early 1980s. With only 30 members, it was a small, struggling church. Joyce anticipated that only a few ladies would attend the women's Bible study she organized in her house. Rather, 115 attended the initial meeting. It soon reached 500 per week. Her enthusiasm was noted by Pastor Rick Shelton, who asked her to fill in on Sundays. The impact of her testimonies about surviving abuse was profound. He ordained her as an associate pastor in 1980, which at the time was uncommon for a woman. She provided counseling to those who were suffering from similar wounds to her own. She also assisted Shelton in leading a 15-minute radio show about using scripture to cure emotions. That little show set the groundwork for something far more significant. She launched her own radio show, Music, called Life in the Word in 1983, when she was 40 years old. Initially broadcast on a single St. Louis station, it quickly gained popularity. Before long, it was broadcast on 6 Midwest stations, reaching listeners in cities like Kansas City and Chicago. She didn't hide what she had been through, therefore her voice stood out. She discussed her experiences of abuse candidly. She opened up honestly about trauma, guilt, and terror, as well as how she regained her breath. Even though the show was only 15 minutes long, it had a profound impact. Her ratings increased by 50% by 1984. Music was particularly appealing to women who had experienced trauma. In that 15 minutes, they felt like they were finally understood. Her candor transformed lives. For the first time, people wrote to her to express how they felt seen. She described the at least 200 rapes she endured at the hands of her father between childhood and the age of 18. Her stories weren't meant to startle anyone. She urged them to demonstrate the possibility of healing. She started receiving hundreds of letters every week by the middle of the 1980s from people who wanted prayer, therapy cassettes, or just someone to tell them they could survive another day. Her bravery made it possible for many Christians to first discuss trauma in an honest manner. In 1985, she was still an associate pastor, but the workload became too much for her to manage. She formally established Life in the Word as a standalone nonprofit organization after resigning. Initially, she operated it from home. At first, all of the money came from listeners, roughly $50,000 annually. Growth was rapid. She made hires. She hired her husband, Dave, to run the company. Keeping up with counseling, music, requests, tape orders, and letters took a lot of team time. The ministry was formally established in August 1985 and granted tax exemption in May 1986. Although it was tiny, the foundation was solid and intimate. Her Battlefield of the Mind radio series was released during this time. Everything changed after that series. The fights she described were the ones that most people kept hidden. She discussed the ideas that kept individuals up at night: fear, depression, and terrible experiences. That series sold almost 10,000 cassettes in 1986 alone. People who listened to the tapes claimed that the music helped them regain mental control, breathe more easily, and sleep better. Eventually, one of her best-selling books was the series. But in the beginning, it was just her voice penetrating the shadows that individuals believed they had to tackle on their own. She did not rise silently. She began to get criticism from certain local religious leaders for discussing wealth by the middle of the 1980s. She made Christianity seem like a way to get rich, they said. St. Louis newspapers published articles challenging her message. They were concerned that people, particularly those who are already having financial difficulties, would be misled. The criticism increased in tandem with her ministry's growth. Some accused her of advocating a teaching style known as name it and claim it. She was followed by the discussions for decades. She continued to teach, nonetheless, since she thought her message would help people overcome their dread. At the age of 50, she made her television debut in 1993. She debuted Enjoying Everyday Life on BT and WGN TV. It began as a 30-minute local program. It reached over 1 million individuals every month in just 2 years. Viewers paused to pay attention to her honest and emotive style. Her discussion of her personal history helped others feel less alone. By 1997, the program was broadcast via satellite in 20 nations. She performed scenarios to give viewers insight into trauma. Some stations even temporarily stopped airing her show because they thought the topic was too mature for young viewers. She remained steadfast. She thought that being honest was therapeutic. She continued to grow her ministry. They relocated to a new $20 million headquarters in Fenton, Missouri, in 1997. Throughout $100 million in donations throughout the years provided the funds. A production facility on the new site enabled her to produce more than 300 episodes of her show annually. Sending her message across continents and languages, it became the center of her work. She continued to talk candidly about her private life. She discussed the infidelity in her second marriage as well as her 3 divorces. She made the most of every error and scar to make someone else feel less self-conscious. Her candor continued to draw people who were going through similar suffering, even if not everyone approved of her strategies. She founded the St. Louis Dream Center with her spouse in 2000. It grew to be a 100-acre facility for those struggling with poverty, addiction, and trauma. They provided housing, food programs, after-school assistance, and addiction recovery to males in need of a place to start over. Over $5,000 people are assisted by the center each year. But more scrutiny accompanied this expansion. The ministry's annual revenue from music reached $110 million by 2002. There have been rumors of a $10 million Learjet used for luxury trips and other purposes. These tales provoked discussions on transparency and prosperity education. Joyce Meyer's first book, Tell Them I Love Them, was published in 1986. She never really stopped once she got going. She wrote more than 100 novels by 2010, something that very few Christian writers had ever accomplished. No one anticipated the impact of her best-known book, Battlefield of the Mind. Over 30 million copies were sold worldwide, and it spent over 500 weeks, nearly 10 years, on Christian bestseller lists. She simultaneously had 5 books in the top charts in 2010 alone. According to a later assessment by Publishers Weekly, Battlefield of the Mind had sold over 2 million copies by 2011 and continued to increase. Her name gradually became well-known in Christian households worldwide. Her novels also influenced previously silent discussions. When her book Beauty for Ashes was published in 2011, it included heartbreaking new information about her father's threats to music silence her. She described how she was silent for years because she was afraid of being imprisoned. It was more than just a testimonies book. It made trauma and recovery more understandable for millions of readers. According to numerous survivors, it gave them courage and created a forum for churches to openly discuss abuse rather than dismissing it. Music. Her ministry's reach extended to extensive relief efforts. Joyce Meyer Ministries declared $110.5 million in assets in 2010. Her charity assisted in providing approximately 50,000 survivors with $5 million worth of food, water, and medical supplies following the Haitian earthquake that year, which claimed over 200,000 lives. That was really a tiny portion of their activities. In Miracle Village, her team constructed hundreds of homes that provided long-term housing for Haitian families. These initiatives not only demonstrated the extent of her influence but also brought up issues. Since such a large ministry required a solid financial structure, people questioned whether money were spent wisely. Her organization became a member of the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability in 2009. Following a Senate inquiry over megachurch expenditures, the ECFA called for stringent audits and openness. Over 90% of the ministry's funds, according to reports, were allocated to outreach and charitable endeavors. That was how they demonstrated their efforts to get better. A $23,000 music marble commode that was bought with ministry funds was one of the previous scandals that contributed to the accreditation. This particular detail became a symbol of criticism and propagated music everywhere. However, the ECFA reports also included changes to royalties and compensation as well as measures toward more prudent expenditure. Nearly 20,000 women attended the St. Louis-based Women Arise conference in 2012. Joyce talked about how she was abused in her first marriage and how Dave, her second husband, helped her heal from years of emotional trauma. The occasion broke the musical taboo around topics that many churches shunned. On panels, survivors talked, and counselors offered practical solutions. It was one of the few occasions that such a sizable crowd allowed for such difficult discussions. She expanded her ministry beyond conferences and sermons. She joined forces with International Justice Mission to combat human trafficking in 2015. They saved almost 1,000 victims collectively. They erected safe homes, sponsored raids, and offered legal assistance. Joyce frequently claimed that her experience influenced her drive to defend others. Every rescue resulted in an adult or child at last waking up fearlessly. These initiatives demonstrated how much misery was concealed globally and how much her government wished to address it. By 2020, she had over 1 million subscribers on her YouTube account. There, she talked about personal experiences, such as the moment, music, in her 20s when she was on the verge of suicide. She claimed that before a friend stepped in, trauma and depression drove her to her breaking point. Her candor benefited those who had similar emotional imprisonment. She became one of the few Christian leaders who were open to discussing mental health, music, without feeling embarrassed because of it. Her ministry covertly provided funding for 100 adoptions of children who had survived abuse between 2015 and 2020. They assisted adoptive families, paid for legal bills, and offered counseling. Each adoption represented a fresh start for a harmed child, yet many people were unaware of these tales. Seldom did the ministry advertise this program. They just provided assistance as required. However, there was also harsh criticism of her ministry. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch published a 4-part expose in November 2003 that revealed Dave made $450,000 and Joyce made $900,000 annually. Additionally, it revealed that ministry donations assisted in the purchase of a $2 million property for their children as well as 4 additional residences totaling an additional $2 million. They had a $20 million headquarters with $5.7 million worth of furniture. The item that everyone was astonished by was the marble commode, which cost $23,000. Many questioned how a ministry that receives over $100 million in donations annually could defend such expenditures. It was a loud and swift pushback. Senator Chuck Grassley began looking into Joyce and 5 other televangelists in 2007. Their name was the Grassley Six. The investigation examined foreign accounts, luxury spending, and private aircraft. The scrutiny was strong since Joyce Meyer Ministries spends approximately $100 million annually. Only 2 ministries completely complied with all requests, including Joyce's. Although no criminal behavior was found, the probe forced the ministry to increase public transparency and oversight. When audits showed that $500,000 had been spent on staff members' cosmetic surgery in 2005, there was even more outrage. The notion of enhancing someone's reputation for ministry job was criticized for sounding like a pretext. In 2009, other reports surfaced, increasing the ministry's need to provide an explanation. Watchdog organizations and funders who questioned if the ministry's principles were changing used these incidents as talking points. Joyce made over $30 million from book sales by 2010. Even though her pay had decreased to $250,000, she was still making more money under her new royalty structure. Self-enrichment, according to some. Because the novels were her own creations, some people felt it was reasonable. Nevertheless, the ministry had to temporarily halt several outreach initiatives and deal with declining donations. Real reforms resulted from years of criticism. In 2009, the ministry established a board with the majority of its members unrelated to Joyce and Dave, increased monitoring, and released yearly music financial reports. They received a C for accountability as a result of these adjustments. Although it was not flawless, it was a step in the direction of a more defined structure. The ministry did not face any legal action and maintained its tax-exempt status. The Dyer scandal then surfaced. Journalist Julie Roy revealed in 2024 that Dyer Television Network president Joni Lamb failed to take action against her granddaughter's sexual assault that occurred between 2021 and 2020. Music, family sources, and internal records said that the warnings were ignored. The word immediately got around. For nearly 2 decades, Joyce has been broadcasting her show on Dyer. She stopped broadcasting there in January 2025, claiming she was unable to continue working for a network that was the subject of such grave accusations. This was personal because of her past. Many perceived her move as a firm stance as she took a step back until police enforcement could handle the case. She moved her show to YouTube, Lifetime, and TBN after quitting Dyer. Over 500,000 people watched her teachings every day on these channels. Although she lost roughly 10% of her Dyer following, her digital following expanded, particularly among younger audiences. YouTube provided live Q&A sessions, devotionals, and a forum for more candid discussions. By the end of 2025, her shows were well established on Lifetime and TBN, and her online profile continued to grow. The Daystar dispute revealed more serious problems within the network. Joni's son, Jonathan Lamb, accused her of financial misbehavior, including paying for a $100,000 honeymoon in 2023 with a Dyer credit card. Joni, he added, earned over $1 million annually in sealed payroll documents. Dyer refuted all of this, claiming that her compensation was certified by an independent agency. However, court records revealed that Marcus Lamb had given her instructions to match their combined salaries upon his passing. With Jonathan's termination and subsequent public arguments, the family conflicts came to an end. Joyce openly backed stricter regulations protecting children in ministries after these incidents brought up memories of her own previous financial troubles. Her daily devotional for November 14, 2025, was titled Discipline Brings Reward. She talked about maintaining honesty throughout challenging times and music integrity. She did not specify the day, but her remarks reflected the circumstances. She related biblical tales of people who endured injustice but maintained music steadfast faith. In just 1 week, its devotional was downloaded by almost 400,000 individuals. It moved those who were observing her during yet another conflict season. Once more, her audience was captivated by her ability to relate spiritual truth to personal struggles.